Bobby Joy, I am so glad to have you on today. Just be able to talk to you and share your story and hear about the incredible struggles and trauma that you went through and how you've turned that around to help people and improve people's lives.
Thank you, Curtis. I really appreciate it coming on the show and sharing my story. If it helps one person, it's worth it.
I know you went through all kinds of different abuse and everything spiritual to sexual abuse. Do you mind kind of giving me a background of where you started out, from a kid when the abuse started and where that took you to now?
Yes, I've been through all sorts of abuse, but particularly incest is the worst form of abuse because it's a love-hate. You don't know how to feel, you don't know how to act, you can't tell, you're so little. Sexual abuse is a double sickness, causing the death of my soul. And it produces guilt and shame and fear and anxiety and postpartum depression and isolation. I withdrew from everybody. I had panic attacks, nightmares. My mother would find me screaming in the middle of the night and she'd comfort me with me on her lap, and she had no clue, in spite of her being molested by my grandfather as well as me, and my uncle was a pedophile as well. So I was molested at age 2 to 8, around age 2, and at age 8 in my little kid head I got to thinking, I mean, I didn't know anything or how to stop it. My mother couldn't protect me because she was in severe denial as well. I just, in my 8-year-old head, I said, you know what? I'm not going to hug grandpa hello or goodbye again. And it stopped the abuse until I went to a Christian youth camp and I got sodomized by a 27-year-old youth pastor, which was in the 1950s. It was traumatic for me. I don't know if you know, but post-traumatic stress disorder is traumatic amnesia, holes in your brain, all the different traumas come down, and the more you have, the deeper it goes. And you can choose to recall it or you can shove it, which I did for 38 years. You can't recall it. My mother couldn't protect me and I couldn't tell her until I faced the perpetrator in 1999 in a sex abuse case and chose to forgive him. And then I wrote my book. So there was many, many years in between. A lot of things I suffered. I went through postpartum depression, which a lot of women have, but you don't talk about it. After the birth of we adopted our firstborn son. My body literally switched off and I couldn't start my period. I couldn't conceive a child. We adopted our firstborn. He was a very sweet, quiet little boy, 5 days old, from another birth mother. I wrote a chapter about him in my book. But postpartum depression is like 50 to 60% of us suffer that. Mine was postpartum severe depression, which goes unnoticed, and 50% of us have postpartum psychosis. So mine was like the second one, and I wanted to run away from it all. I wanted to run away from me. I had severe panic attacks. Nobody talked about that kind of stuff, back then when I was starting to recall the memories.
I am so sorry you went through all that. So I love seeing that have not only decided to be a better person, better parent, but also that you're inspiring and uplifting. And I mean, you've been on the Dr. Oz show and all kinds of different TV and radio and podcasts and all kinds of stuff, right?
Yes, I have. I'm in Survivors Against Violence Everywhere. I've been chosen to lead that. I have been put in Miracle Mind Global Network as a mental health advocate. I've been featured on Dr. Oz, and that was a wonderful show with 20 survivors of sexual assault and harassment were brought on the show, and I was one of 20. Dr. Oz was very compassionate. He didn't seem to understand much. So Dr. Robin Smith, Oprah's therapist, led the discussion, led us through it. Just to be in Times Square in New York City with him was amazing. And I have had a movie made in my life, documentary in the Philippines, which can be seen on my website, listentothecry.org.
We get a lot of people on, not only in the magazine, but speaking at our events and stuff that
Yes.
are survivors, and you would never know. So many of them have decided to turn their lives around like you have and just become incredible, outstanding, uplifting people. And I love seeing that you're using that to help people that maybe didn't realize that other people have gone through the same kind of thing. Everybody that survives abuse, we typically feel like it's just us and we're the only ones. And
You do
kind of a
feel
secret.
all alone. 1 out of 3 of us have gone through sexual trauma. One out of 3, 1 out of
Wow.
5 boys. Every 2 minutes, a child is molested. Every 5 minutes, a woman is raped. Sex offenders who target children like you said, have often been targeted themselves. And I speak to sex offenders in prisons worldwide, which tells me that I can go in because I'm healed, or I should say healing. But a lot of them have come from abusive, alcoholic, rageful homes with deep insecurities. They cross boundaries to meet their own perverted needs. And it's addiction to unnatural sex. It's a void in their soul. I didn't go on to repeat it, but my grandfather did. He repeated it with my cousins and me and my mother. Exodus 34:7 says he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children to the sins of the fathers to the third and fourth generation.
And I love that you tie that into the biblical verses. Do you have other verses that you like to rely on or share with people that are struggling?
Sure. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of the poor and destitute. Speak up and judge fairly, defend the rights of the poor and needy. Proverbs 31:8 and 9. My addiction was codependency. I was a rescuer, and I was rescued by a heroin drug dealer. We went into, like I said, crack houses and tried to wrestle those out. I wanted to help every drunk on the street. My calling is outside the walls of the church, or outside the homes, outside the camps, to help them understand what happened to them. And they'd come in our home. I've had prostitutes and ex-drug addicts and pimps and you name it. Now that I understand what I did was codependency in trying to rescue, I was the one that needed rescuing.
And what made you decide to reach out and help people outside the church?
I didn't have therapy. My therapy became the heroin drug dealer before he went back to prison, gave me the most wonderful gift. Was the NIV 12-step recovery devotional Bible. And I know Tony Lee uses 12-step in her groups. I teach a support group called Beauty Out of Ashes. But the drug dealer gave me his Bible, and that has literally saved our marriage, saved my life. My husband's father committed suicide, and he didn't talk about that. I don't think men do much anyway. Women tell each other, but to get the hope that I am giving people was I had to face myself. I had to face the demons from my past. So what happened was in July of 1998, I went back to the camp where I was sodomized by this pastor. And I saw a best friend that I hadn't seen in 27 years. She couldn't go back. She was also a pastor's daughter, and she was a pastor's wife. She had just gotten out of a drug treatment center, came to me weeping and said, I've got so much defeat and emptiness and addictions and sorrow. And I said, me too. And I named the pastor's name right at the campground that had molested both of us, along with other girls. So a committee was formed with 8 clergy and a psychologist. They flew us to Florida. No stone was unturned. There were more victims. There were 4 of us that flew there. Letters were sent out, and it was with the Christian Missionary Alliance denomination headquarters where they set up a committee. The clergy was in complete denial. He said he had no memory, and this happened to me with him in the 1950s. But I want to say one more thing. 1 year prior, in 1997, the Mama Alliance Academy in Gabon, Guinea, South Africa, a boarding school was set up with the Christian Missionary Alliance. Missionary children were separated from their parents. Back in the day, MAF would fly the kids to this jungle camp in the Gabon, Africa. They were separated from their moms and dads. Even the siblings were separated when they were flown to this camp. And I could never separate from my children. They were too precious to me. Yeah. I don't know how anybody can for the sake of the gospel. To me, that's abuse. The parents thought they were protected in the remote jungle where there was no communication with the parents, no cell phones or anything. And there were abuse allegations of all kinds, Curtis, that happened at this camp. So they set up a committee when these kids became adults, and they said to themselves, is it a cover up? We need to set up an independent council so they can listen to these kids, the adult kids. And they said, what will it cost us? Do they need therapy? Will there be lawsuits? Will we be embarrassed? No, we need to do the right thing. So healing and forgiveness and restoration, they went to a retreat, but a lot of them had turned away from God. They've turned away from church. They've become gays and lesbians. And those are the ones that come to me at prison and domestic violence conferences, because a lot of them, most of them had been molested. 7 weeks later, I got to tell you, I got a phone call from the head of the committee telling me, Barb, you need to sit down. And I sat down, he was weeping. And this is documented in my book. I had to come home and write it up. 7 weeks later, the clergy that molested me sodomized the others. fell down the stairs and broke his back and died. A story that you don't hear very often, but God took him out. I did my part. I forgave.
Yeah.
I let the ember of hatred go.
That's probably better than a lightning bolt, because at least he felt it falling down the stairs.
Oh, I know it. That's what this documentary is in the Philippines that I did
Wow.
with this movie. In the Philippines, we were there as humanitarian aid workers. They set up with the 700 Club, came and interviewed me, and they did a 4-minute YouTube. Well, you can find it on my website, listentothecry.org.
And would you like to tell me about your book? I'd love to know the title, where people can get it, and then also kind of the message.
Listen to the Cry of a Child, the Deafening Silence of Sexual Abuse. My book is not just about sexual abuse. I went through infidelity and infertility with my marriage. My husband's eyes got him in trouble. That was his addiction with pornography. And if you think nobody sees you, God sees you. Think of it with your wife by your side. Would you do this? But a lot of people do. And then infidelity came in my marriage. And it was like my life was already shattered and broken. My marriage vows were broken. We're still together. 58 years married, which is a miracle. He's my best friend. I had rights to divorce, but I kept him and I helped him recover using this 12-step recovery devotional Bible. But lust leads to the death of your soul and a marriage. The wall came up between us, and God's warnings are very severe. I used to put scripture verses up on his mirror that he read. I wanted him to know he needed to own up to what he did to me before I could forgive him. So that was a big part of getting us free. So I wrote my book in a week using pain journals I kept hidden. I was afraid somebody would find them. If you want a personally signed copy, you can contact me at bobbijoyhansen@juno.com. It's my email address. I'll ship a signed copy to you. God's given me a huge gift of compassion. Compassion is a deep feeling of sympathy or empathy, and you can feel the other person's pain. When I go to conferences, I see the walls up, I see their eyes, I see the hidden shame in their face, and you want to alleviate their suffering. So I've, with the calling that I have on my life, it's a really heavy call, but there was a lot of persecution that came with it. It was a training ground for me to help those who are bound up and oppressed. Consequently, my life became the hospital ward where I was taught that the wounded can be bound up and you can heal and you can get over this, because I have done it. I've taught these addicts that come into my home, and we teach them how to heal. Why do child victims of sexual abuse carry their secrets without disclosing them for decades? Because they've got this frozen scream, or PTSD. It's traumatic amnesia. You're fearful, you've got no words, you have no understanding, especially as a kid. Suppressed memories, dissociation, where it's a mind-body split to cope, isolation, overwhelming shame, and then you're blamed. When you start telling, especially if it's somebody in your family, you're going to be blamed oftentimes. Now, my mother and father were thrilled when I wrote my book. My mother was like screaming from the rooftops that Bobbi's finally written her book, and I'm so glad that she has. But other family members are threatened by the family when they're, you're going to about ready to expose all these things in your family. Or maybe the perpetrator has manipulated you in grooming at an early age and you're not believed, and there's deception and void of trust. The trust for me took a long time for me to get back and realize that I can trust my husband now. We have accountability with one another.
When you found out that your husband was doing the stuff he was doing, what was it when you found out that it changed, or what was the turning point there for him?
I walked in on him when he was in bed with my brother's wife, and we made love all night because I was so void, and I couldn't believe it. The rug was pulled out from underneath me. For him, he didn't talk about it, and he said, "I thought you forgave me." Well, forgiveness has to come from the heart. I wrote a chapter about forgiveness in my book. You can't just, "Oh, honey, I forgive you." He has to own up and acknowledge and realize this is what he did to hurt me. Not only hurt me, but betray me, my worst fears, and then another year or two later, it happened again. It took him a long time to talk about it, but I couldn't watch him and help him heal until I recovered, till I got deep with God in the Recovery Devotional Bible. I started reading the scriptures like the woman at the well and Lazarus coming out of the tomb. When I preached in the Philippines. We were there for two months. I wove my story along with scriptures, Curtis, to have people understand that Lazarus was dead man walking. And Jesus said to his friends, loose him and let him go. Who's loosening us and unbinding those sticking bandages that we've had all of our lives? I didn't come clean with my secrets till I was in my 40s, and a lot of people don't. And I am so thankful now that I did journal and I had pain journals, because when I wrote my book, it just poured and poured and poured and poured out. And my husband helped me bind it up and send it to a publisher. You know, you have to recall the memories. A lot of people don't. They're like, no, I'll never forgive. No, I'll never, tell my story. But listening without judgment, with deep empathy, shows a survivor you have a gift to give to the world. And that's what I'm doing today.
Do you have anything else that you'd like to add in to your interview in Newswire magazine? I think it would be a really great thing for people to get a hold of your book and be able to maybe invite you for interviews or TV interviews, whatever.
I would love that. And I've had many. I have 3 shows this week that I've been preparing for. But a lot of times when you have trauma happen to you, you have triggers. I went into the grocery store the other day and a trigger happened with me. I saw the ice cream sauce and I was getting fudge sauce, and I saw pineapple sauce. Well, that was what my grandfather bought. He ate all the ice cream up, I'm sure, when we came to his house at Thanksgiving and Christmas, and took me out in his car, unzipped himself. I screamed and tried to get out of the car. The trigger happened with the pineapple sauce. I don't like pineapple sauce now because that's a trigger that he, bought the ice cream sauce. So triggers are like hidden time bombs in the minefields of our emotional lives, or like snipers hiding in the shadow of our subconscious. With all of our efforts to heal, live virtuous lives, or forgive those who harmed us, one snide comment, one disrespectful remark, or a swear word, or a glance, or a smell, or a rejection can light the fuse on our deeper emotional wounds. Even with years of therapy or reading self-help books or journaling, a trigger goes off. And the person in front of us at the grocery store, or somebody that we've seen, goes, you think that's your grandfather. Maybe my husband thinks that's his father that took his life. And the perpetrator who abused you, or the partner that cheated on you, or the person we lost to a tragedy. Suddenly the lens through which we see becomes like a movie projector on the screen of our present lives and the pains of our past.
That's powerful. Do you have any kind of a final thought that you'd like to share with people that are maybe somebody right now that's reading this article and trying to figure out, they're just remembering some of this past stuff that had happened to them. They didn't even know that they were abused as a kid. What advice would you give them to start researching and start healing with that?
Well, if they read my book, they would understand. A book was shipped by me to New Zealand this week, and the woman is deeply connected to me now. She also ordered my support material. But the call of God on my life was like a distant drum. There was a high price to the call. You either listen to the voice of others, or you listen to the voice of God. I was persecuted. I was silenced. I was victimized over and over. And then I thought, you know what? I have to listen to God's voice. People would tell me, Barb, you need to come to Bible study. No, I can't. I'm in the Word of God at home. I'm getting hope in this Bible I'm reading, is what I would tell them. So I'm an overcomer, and my faith healed me, just like the woman that touched Jesus' garment. The life went out of Jesus. Yeah. And she was bleeding for 12 years. She had so much pain in her life, pain on spending on doctors and money that she couldn't afford, trying to get healed. So that's like a victim. If you have that pain in your life, all you need to do is touch Jesus' heart, hem. You don't, yes, to get in touch with him and your emotions and what's happened to you is important. But I tell people, don't dig and dig and dig and try to resurface the memories. They'll come as you get in touch with your emotions and your mental health.
Man, I think you got an incredible story. I told you not everybody that we interview qualifies. We'll turn some down and say, I don't think your story is going to fit our readership, but this is definitely a story that can really help people, inspire, uplift them, and also help with healing. So I would definitely like to feature you in the magazine.